Guys, there's a massive dock worker port strike going on right now that you need to be aware of. So I wanted to have this quick conversation with you just to kind of explain what's happening, guys, so you are aware of what's going on right now. As a consumer, you need to be paying attention. This dock worker strike that's going on right now will affect you if it goes on for more than a week or two. So please make sure you understand what's taking place here. So let's have this quick conversation, guys. The ILA, which is the union that represents the East Coast and Gulf Coast dock workers, is seeking higher wages and a ban on the use of some automated equipment. I'll dig into that in a little bit, guys. But they say that the workers deserve to be compensated for the important work that they do to keep American commerce moving and growing. Okay. The dock worker strike began just yesterday, October 1st, and it involves more than 45,000 members of the International Longshoremen's Association. It affects ports. And when I say ports, goods coming into America that are imported, goods that we buy at the retail stores all day, every day, right? So anything that comes into America that's imported in along the East Coast and the Gulf Coast of America from Maine to Texas, right, is going to be affected by that. That means that these dock workers are not doing their job to bring in these goods, and that will affect all of us eventually, right? So the key reasons for this strike that's going on includes basically, like I said, demand for higher wages, job security, and they're concerned about automation replacing workers. Now, the union is pushing for some hourly wage increase and greater control over how container royalties are distributed out to workers. So the strike could have major economic implications, guys, especially for supply chains and, of course, for perishable goods. So if the ILA dock worker strike continues, we as Americans may face delays in receiving these essential supplies and goods that we sort of take for granted that show up in the grocery store or at Target or wherever all the time. And we'll start feeling the pinch here in just a little bit. Not only will it be a lack of those things that get shipped into America, but we may see prices go up as well. This could have an impact on inflation, especially like for those perishable goods, things that can't sit. Now, listen, a canned good can sit on the dock for 6 months, but bananas can't do that, right? Vegetables spoil, right? So much of our nation's imports come through this East Coast and Southern ports. Retailers ultimately may experience some shortages as well. These goods that come in through the East Coast and the Gulf could be rerouted to the West Coast ports, right? Or air freight. Some of it, not much of it, right? But these are other options. But of course, what happens when everything that's supposed to come into the East Coast in terms of imports get rerouted to the West Coast? Well, the West Coast is going to get backed up and things are going to get more expensive and it's going to be less efficient. All of this is going to trickle down into perhaps shortage of supply and increased prices for us in the stores. If this dock worker strike continues, it could ultimately significantly disrupt the U.S. supply chain, right? Shortages, delays in deliveries, rising prices, etc. So we should be paying attention to this and what's happening, guys. So, guys, I pulled up a quick article I want to talk about real quick. This article actually came out yesterday. It says dock workers may have the negotiating advantage in the strike against U.S. ports. And I'll just kind of go through a little bit of this, guys, and talk about it. The 45,000 dock workers who went on strike yesterday for the first time in decades at 36 U.S. ports from Maine to Texas may have the upper hand in the standoff with port operators. Now, there's several reasons why they may have the upper hand. We'll see, right? But organized labor enjoys basically rising support and has had a string of recent victories in other industries, in addition to being kind of backed by what's considered to be a pro-union presidential administration, Joe Biden, right? Has kind of given kind of lip service as sort of backing and being pro-union in the past. Now, when I asked about this a couple of days ago, the president actually came out and said, no, we're not going to do anything about it at this time. But the president has the ability to step in. We'll talk about that. I think this article mentions that later. The dock workers' negotiating stand is likely further strengthened by the nation's supply chain of goods being under pressure in the aftermath of the hurricane that happened recently along the East Coast there. The union is also pointing to shipping companies' record profits. So the union is also saying, hey, look, the shipping companies themselves are making some incredible profit. Now, this profit has come basically because of shortages that resulted back a couple of years ago because of the pandemic that's still sort of lingering on. They're also pointing to a more generous contract that the West Coast dock workers achieved just last year. So the longshoremen workloads also have increased, and the effects of inflation have sort of eroded their pay. That's why they want more pay. It also says in this article, in addition, commerce in and out of the U.S. has been growing, playing into the union's advantage. And also further enhancing its leverage is still a tight job market, with workers in some industries demanding, and in some cases receiving, a larger share of companies' outsized profits, which is what the longshoremen union is wanting right now. Now, the article goes on to say, I think this work group has a lot of bargaining power, said Harry Katz, who's a professor of collective bargaining, because obviously this is a CBA issue, collective bargaining agreement issue that needs to be hashed out and worked out. The dock worker strike, which is their first since 1977, could snarl supply chains and cause shortages and higher prices if it stretches on for more than a few weeks. That means higher prices for us. And this is why we have to pay attention. It goes on to say that experts say consumers won't likely notice a shortage for at least a few weeks. But that's just a few weeks. This is so big and so massive, guys. And this is why we got to pay attention to it, because it just takes a couple of weeks of this strike to last before we may start seeing an increase in prices and a shortage of some of the supplies of things that we normally take for granted and go buy at the store, grocery store, etc. It says, some perishable items such as bananas could disappear from grocery stores, although at this time of the year, most other fruits and vegetables in America are domestically grown and not processed at ports. So it says in anticipation of the strike, this is a good thing here. Most major retailers also stocked up on goods, moving ahead shipments of holiday gift items, etc. So some retailers have sort of prepared for this thing, right? Not all, but some have. The strike coming weeks before a tight presidential election could also become a factor in the presidential race if shortages begin to affect many voters. So the pressure could eventually grow for the president to step in and intervene to try to force a temporary suspension of a strike. So you guys know, when it comes to the ports, the president has the ability to step in. It says in early picketing, workers outside the Port of Philadelphia walked in a circle and chanted, "No work without a fair contract." The union message boards on the side of a truck reading, "Automation hurts families," right? So this quick little map right here shows you the ports that are impacted from this particular strikes. And again, all the way up from Maine, near Maine, all the way around to Texas, guys, as you can see on this particular map. So all of these ports are ports that take in imports into America, and from there, they're shipped out to the retail stores all across America. That's who's actually striking at this particular time. Now, it goes on to say, and I want to hit this point, that the president of the United States could actually go in and force workers back to work under what's called the Taft-Hartley Act. The article itself says, under the Taft-Hartley Act, President Biden could seek a court order for an 80-day cooling off period that would end the strike, at least temporarily. But he has told reporters, like I mentioned earlier, just a couple of days ago, that he wouldn't take that step. Now, President Biden could obviously risk losing that union support if it went in and exercised its ability to enact this Taft-Hartley Act, where the president can step in. If the president steps in just weeks before a major presidential election, that's going to cause an issue, because now you have all these union workers that are forced to go back to work because of what the president did. Of course, the president would lose support from union people and people that are on these picket lines. So it becomes kind of a political thing as well, right? Just ahead of the election that's coming up. It said yesterday, the White House continued to ask the alliance to negotiate a fair contract that reflects the longshoremen's contribution to the economy. Now, all this not to mention, guys, the recent Hurricane Helene that just came through the East Coast. It says, as our nation climbs out of the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, Biden said in a statement, dock workers will play an essential role in getting communities the resources they need. Now is not the time for ocean carriers to refuse to negotiate a fair wage for these essential workers while raking in record profits. Ben Nolan, a transportation analyst with Stifel, said the administration isn't likely to intervene until consumers start to see empty shelves or can't find critical goods like medicines. Medications and other things come in on containers, Nolan said. I think if the administration wanted to have a reason to get involved, it's stuff like that. So this is huge, guys. Very, very big thing happening here. Could the president intervene? Yes. Could the president turn around and face some backlash from union workers that'll be forced to go back to work? Yes. So our job as consumers, guys, is to pay close attention. The bottom line with this strike is this. The strike blocks everything from food to automobile shipments to nails to medication across dozens of ports from Maine to Texas from entering into our country and being processed and then shipped on. Of course, there's been some preparation by some retailers. Of course, they could go around the ports and go all the way to the West Coast and drop off goods there. But of course, that's more inconvenient, less efficient, will cause backups on the West Coast, and will eventually, just weeks from now, not very long, trickle down to us and cause perhaps some shortages and perhaps higher prices. My personal opinion, I don't think the president will allow that to go on. I don't think he'll allow it to go on because we are smack dab in the middle of, towards the end of, a presidential campaign or a presidential race. But at the same time, it's going to be dicey if he decides to step in and intervene. But this disruption could cost the economy in America billions of dollars per day if this thing continues to go on. It could ultimately, let's say this thing goes on for 3 or 4 weeks, maybe a month, 2 months. This thing could ultimately hurt jobs. It could also threaten to increase inflation, of course, increasing the price of goods and services, cause shortages, and cause a major impact to regular, everyday American consumers. That's why I wanted to do this video so you guys are aware of what's going on. This is my warning. Massive dock workers port strike will affect you if it continues. All right. So pay close attention to what's going on, guys. Listen, drop me a comment below and let me know what you think about this strike that's going on. How will it eventually end? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, guys, and I'll keep you updated on this channel. The best person to take care of the old you is the young you. Guys, take good care of yourself and take care of other people. Until the next video, peace.